When you've got a global racing league putting on events all throughout the world, that gives you a lot of options. Just where are the Formula One racers going to be putting on a show next? Well, as you might guess by the title of the video, Max Verstappen believes the 2023 Grand Prix should be hosted in South Africa. Why is that? What are the other contenders? You'll find out all this in today's video, so stick around till the end. Before we get started, who is Max Verstappen? If you've been way out of the loop for a while as far as the F1 scene goes, Max Verstappen might be an obscure name to you, since he really rose to prominence pretty recently. But at just 24 years of age, he's gotten a load of accolades under his belt. Born into a motorsports family, the boy was driving quad bikes when he was just 2 years old, so it's no surprise he was winning go-kart races by age 7 and spent his adolescence as a professional kart racer. He took the step up to Formula One races in 2014. In doing so, he became the youngest driver in the league's history at 17 years of age. And amazingly, it was only after his first full season in F1 racing that he actually got a street driver's license. That, honestly seems impossible, but it's a fact apparently. After spending his first couple of years in the league repping the Scuderia Toro Rosso team, Max took the mantle of the Red Bull car in 2016, and he's remained with the team ever since and been quite dominant as well. He's never placed below 10th in the final standings since joining up with them, placed 3rd in back-to-back years in 2019 and 2020, and he capped this all off by taking first place in 2021 to become the first ever Dutch F1 world champion. That means he's the reigning defending champ going into this season, and so far he's maintaining first place in the standings this year too, meaning there's a very real chance that he manages the repeat. We seem to be on the cusp of something very special with this young man indeed. So what did he say about South Africa exactly? This story about Verstappen and South Africa actually comes from a fairly unique place. UK-based digital media publisher LED Bible put out a YouTube video earlier in July featuring Max Verstappen and Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez. This was for a show called Agree to Disagree and was meant to be a debate of many of F1's bigger stories, but the two of them actually seemed to be in agreement on a lot of things. One of the questions was whether or not Monaco should be dropped from the schedule, which both agreed absolutely should not happen, as they valued the tradition of racing at the locale. Now, of course, when the answer to most questions is the two of them quickly agreeing, that doesn't do much to fill time. So to keep things from being too short, they asked a follow-up on this, inquiring about where the two might want to go in future seasons, and funnily enough, they were in agreement on this too, with both of them answering South Africa. Max explained, quote, "When you look at the continents where you race, I think we definitely need to try and pursue a bit more into Africa. At the moment, it looks like the most likely place to go is South Africa," end quote. And his reasons for feeling this way, well, seemed a little lacking, but to be fair, we've only got a 10-second soundbite to work with here. It's not as though he had the time to drop an essay on it. We'll get into what he might mean by "when you look at the continents" later, but his other point was simply that they had been there before and already had the tracks, which is true, but the same could of course be said for a large number of other sites, right? We'll get into why South Africa makes sense for 2023 soon, but first, let's look back on the sites of the 2022 season. Where has the Formula One calendar taken us so far in 2022, and what's coming up next? As you might expect in these most tumultuous of times, the 2022 F1 calendar has shifted dramatically from what was planned originally. There was intended to be a Chinese Grand Prix, but it had to be removed from the list due to COVID-19 restrictions rearing their ugly head once again, as will seemingly continue to happen until the end of time at this rate. Another scrap race was the planned Russian Grand Prix in Sochi, which was intended to take place in the fall between the Italian and Singapore races. You can probably guess what happened there. You know, without naming any names here, a certain invasion of a certain country happened to draw the ire of a certain entire rest of the world, and that led to the race being suspended under protest, which later turned into a full-on cancellation. A replacement for the race was in talks, but never came to fruition. The aforementioned Singapore Grand Prix, along with the Canadian, Japanese, and Australian iterations, all made their triumphant return on 2022's calendar after missing the previous 2 seasons due to, again, COVID-related reasons. Of course, in doing so, they are replacing the Turkish, Styrian, and Portuguese Grand Prix, which were sadly only on the 2021 calendar as a result of the other countries not being able to attend. That has to sting a bit. By the way, did you know that the plural of Prix is Prix? Well, now you know. The Qatar Grand Prix also isn't returning from the last season, but that's only because the plans are to come back with a new purpose-built circuit in 2022. 2023. Lastly, a new race was added to the lineup for 2022 in the form of the Miami Grand Prix, meaning that the US doubled up on races this year, which we can only presume was due to overwhelming demand from the entire rest of the world. Alright, now what's been announced for the 2023 season so far? Well, it seems that overwhelming demand was so overwhelming that a third track in the US has also been announced, this being the Las Vegas Grand Prix. In all seriousness, what you're seeing here is Formula One looking to capitalize on their newfound popularity and take away some of that NASCAR market share, as they look to become the leading motorsports organization going forward. They're still trailing behind in US viewership, but it's a lot closer now than it used to be, with them on an explosion as NASCAR seems to be in decline. But of course, that's a topic suited to its own video, isn't it? The Chinese Grand Prix is currently slated to make its return, barring of course some very easily foreseen circumstances, because COVID is still going to be here in 2023, sadly. And Saudi Arabia will be joining Qatar in introducing a new circuit for its Grand Prix. All in all, we've got 20 Grand Prix announced thus far, which does not seem to leave a lot of room left on the calendar. And as of now, 5 of the circuits which were contracted for 2022 have not been announced as returning yet. These would include the Austrian, Belgian, French, Mexico City, and of course, the fabled Monaco Grand Prix. It seems hard to believe that Mexico and France would be excluded, and Monaco is one of the most storied and legendary of racing locales, and has been a Formula One tradition dating back to the league's inception. While understandably there's a lot of concern about the fate of Monaco, I think the odds are in its favor that they won't drop one of their most prestigious races out of nowhere. So what makes South Africa a suitable destination for an F1 Grand Prix? Back to Verstappen's comment on continents, his comment as it were, at present, Formula One's reach is as global as it's ever been, spanning many different major continents. But Africa, the second largest continent in the world, both in terms of size and population, is currently being untouched. 18% of the human population is currently unrepresented there, when that doesn't have to be the case at all. The Kyalami Grand Prix, held just north of Johannesburg, was a staple of F1 back in the day. It was annual from 1967 to 1980, and then on again off again until 1993. That's a lot of races, a lot of history, and yet a long time to wait for a return. Longer than the Argentine and Korean Grand Prix absences, and more stories than the Swiss and Swedish Grand Prix. And yes, that happens to be another way to make the plural for Grand Prix. And man, am I sick of saying that by now. But anyway, looking at the facts, it's hard to deny that the Kyalami Grand Prix, or the South African Grand Prix, as it'd likely be called these days for consistency's sake, is due for a return. Will it happen in 2023? Only time will tell. And that is all we have time for today. Where do you hope that the Formula One series goes in 2023? That question is probably another way to ask, where are you from? We realize, but that's fine. There's nothing like seeing these things live after all. Do you agree that South Africa is due for a race? Let us know down in the comments below. And until next time, thanks for watching.